Have you ever found yourself in one of those conversations where you are trying desperately to get someone to agree with you?
Oh, yeah. We all have.
Right, and they finally say yes, but you can just feel in your bones that it means absolutely nothing.
It's just totally hollow.
Exactly. Like maybe you're sitting in a boardroom across the table from a client in a really high-stakes business deal.
Yeah, the pressure is on.
And you're going over the final terms, outlining the deliverables, and they're just nodding along,
That-
smiling.
They're giving you that perfect corporate nod.
Right. They're saying, oh, yes, absolutely. We are completely on the same page. But the second they walk out of that room, you just know that contract is going straight into a shredder.
You can feel the disconnect immediately.
Or, maybe it's completely domestic. You're just trying to get a toddler to put on their shoes so you can leave the house.
That might actually be a harder negotiation.
It really is.
Yeah.
You look them dead in the eye and you say, are you going to put your shoes on right now? And they give you that angelic, high-pitched little yes.
And then 10 minutes later.
10 minutes later, they are still running around the living room in their socks, completely oblivious to your existence.
Yeah, it's a universally frustrating human experience.
It really is.
We have all been on the receiving end of that hollow, empty yes.
Yeah.
It's an utterance that is technically an agreement, right?
Okay.
But fundamentally,
It changes nothing.
exactly, it changes absolutely nothing about the other person's actual behavior.
Right.
We hear it all the time in business and relationships, just in casual passing. And yet we keep chasing it.
Like it's the ultimate prize.
Yeah, we treat getting a yes as if it is the absolute finish line of human communication.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are taking an absolute sledgehammer to everything you think you know about communication and persuasion and, just getting what you want.
We really are.
We are looking at the hidden, highly counterintuitive psychology of negotiation. And we're pulling these insights straight from the playbook of the FBI's Elite Crisis Negotiation Unit.
The absolute best of the best.
Right. And just to set the parameters right up front, the goal today is not to learn how to bully people into submission.
No, definitely not.
We aren't looking at ways to verbally beat someone into a corner so they are forced to agree with you. What we are actually hunting for is a very specific, almost magical two-word phrase that actually triggers genuine, lasting behavioral change.
And spoiler alert, it is not the word yes.
It is definitely not.
If there is one thing you really need to prepare yourself for today, it is that you are going to have to unlearn almost every piece of standard sales advice or, negotiation tactics you've ever been taught.
Throw it all out the window.
Pretty much. Because the journey we are taking today is wild. We are going to travel from the incredibly tense, humid jungles of the Philippines during a $10 million hostage standoff.
Which is an insane story.
It really is, with a violent extremist group. And then we're going to take those exact same lessons all the way to a very mundane, everyday pharmaceutical sales pitch in a doctor's office in the U.S.
And the connection there is just fascinating.
Right. What's so compelling is that the universal laws of human cooperation, like the exact psychological levers that make us want to collaborate with one another, they are identical in both of those vastly different environments.
Yeah, which is exactly why this is so critical for you listening right now. Whether you are, gearing up to negotiate a massive salary bump, or you're trying to navigate a stubborn client who just keeps moving the goalposts.
Or just dealing with family friction.
Yes. Chronic family friction around the holidays. Mastering these specific linguistic triggers is going to completely transform how you communicate.
Because the stakes might be different, right?
Right.
But the human brain sitting across the table from you is running the exact same software.
Exactly. So before we can even begin to understand what this ultimate two-word phrase of agreement actually is, we really have to start by completely rethinking our relationship with disagreement.
We have to start with the word no.
Right.
The foundation of true negotiation actually begins with no. And I know that sounds completely backwards.
It really does.
Because it flies directly in the face of what is often called the momentum of yes strategy.
Oh, right.
This is the bedrock of traditional sales training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the entire goal is to trap the other person in a cascading series of positive affirmations.
The classic telemarketer trap.
Exactly.
You pick up the phone, and this overly cheerful voice on the other end says, "Hello, Mr. Smith, do you like to drink water?"
Right, and what are you going to say?
Exactly. Am I going to say, "No, I exclusively hydrate with motor oil"? No, of course you say yes.
And then they immediately pivot.
Yep. They say, "Well, wouldn't you like that water to be clean and pure?"
Yeah.
And wouldn't you like a filtration system that guarantees that purity for your family? It's just they're cornering you with this series of undeniable microagreements.
So let's look at the neurology of that interaction.
Yeah.
How does that actually make you feel when you were on the receiving end of that script?
I instantly hate it. My guard goes all the way up.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being manipulated, like I'm trapped in a verbal maze where every single exit has been blocked off. I just view the person speaking as completely untrustworthy because I know they're walking me down a plank and I'm just waiting for the moment they push me off into a sail.
What's fascinating here is the psychological reaction you just described. The traditional sales approach assumes that if you can force a yes, you are building momentum toward a final agreement.
Right, building the habit of saying yes.
Exactly. But neurologically, forcing a yes actually creates an intense threat response.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Your counterpart's amygdala starts firing. They feel cornered. They feel like their autonomy is being stripped away.
Which explains why I want to hang up the phone immediately.
Right. However, when you allow someone to say no, or even, actively encourage them to say no, the exact opposite neurological response occurs.
Wait, really?
Yes. Saying no actually makes the speaker feel safe. It makes them feel secure. And most importantly, it makes them feel like they are in complete control of the interaction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I am really struggling to see how this translates to an actual strategy.
Sure.
If the ultimate goal of a negotiation is to get what I want, why on earth would I actively invite rejection? I mean, it feels completely counterproductive.
It seems that way, yeah.
It feels like starting a race by putting your car in reverse and just slamming on the gas. If I want you to agree to a new project timeline, asking a question that makes you say no seems like I'm just building a brick wall between us.
I get why you'd think that.
It's like conversational quicksand, the harder you push for the yes, the faster the other person tries to escape. I get that part. But leaning into the no just seems like surrendering before the negotiation even starts.
It is a super common misconception.
Yeah.
We really have to reframe what no actually represents to the human ego.
Okay.
The psychology of autonomy is arguably the most powerful driver in human interaction.
Autonomy.
Right. Every single human being has a deep-seated evolutionary need to feel autonomous, to feel that they are the authors of their own destiny.
We want to be in charge.
Exactly. When a counterpart says no, they're not permanently rejecting you or your premise. What they're doing is defining their space.
Oh, interesting.
They're establishing a boundary. They're verbally proving to themselves, hey, I have the power to protect myself in this interaction.
Like putting up a shield.
More like proving they have the shield, so they don't have to keep it raised. Once they throw that no out there and you respect it, their anxiety immediately plummets.
Because they've proven they are safe.
Exactly. They've proven to themselves that they are safe. And ironically, it is only from that position of safety and lowered anxiety that they actually gain the cognitive bandwidth required to truly listen to what you have to say next.
I see. So by giving them the power to say no, you are essentially letting them keep their defensive shields powered down. Because they don't need the shields if they know they have the kill switch to the conversation right in their hands.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this leads to some highly counterintuitive tactical shifts in everyday communication.
Give me an example.
Well, think about how people normally start a phone call when they need something from a really busy colleague.
Oh, it's always, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk? Or, is now a good time?
Right. And what does that do?
It puts them on the spot.
Exactly. It forces them to either give a reluctant, distracted yes while they're typing an email, or it forces them to feel guilty for saying no and shutting you down.
Yeah, you're backing them into a corner from the very first sentence.
Right. The tactical shift here, drawn straight from crisis negotiation, is to change that opening question to, is now a bad time to talk?
Wait, is now a bad time? Because if it is a bad time, they say, yes, it's a bad time, I'm swamped.
Right. And you respect that boundary and call back later.
But if it's not a terribly bad time, they get to say, no, it's not a bad time.
And what just happened?
They just said no. They feel totally in control of their schedule, and now they have willingly granted you their undivided attention.
It seems like a minor semantic shift, right? But psychologically, the difference is massive. You've bypassed the threat response entirely.
That is so smart.
And it goes even deeper. Sometimes, the only way to get a counterpart to actually listen and engage is by actively forcing them into a no.
How do you do that?
You can do this by intentionally mislabeling one of their emotions or desires. So say you might be in a meeting that's just going nowhere. You could say something seemingly ridiculous like, well, it seems like you want this project to fail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You say that to a colleague, and their immediate reaction is going to be incredibly defensive.
Right. But in a highly clarifying way.
Yeah. They'll snap back. No, of course I don't want it to fail. I want it to succeed. I just think the Q3 timeline is completely unrealistic given our current headcount.
And look what just happened.
By forcing the no, they corrected you. And in the process of correcting you, they just revealed their actual underlying concern, the timeline and the headcount.
Exactly. They are now engaging with you based on their true parameters, not just putting up a polite wall of vague resistance.
There is one specific tactic related to this that I absolutely love, and I can think of a dozen times I wish I had known it.
Which one?
It's for that maddening situation when you have a potential business partner or a freelance client or even a vendor who is just completely ignoring your emails. They've just ghosted you.
Oh, the ghosting.
Right. Normally, we send that desperate, slightly pathetic follow-up, like just checking in or circling back on this or bubbling this up to the top of your inbox.
The worst.
It is. But the ultimate email to send in that scenario is a single, clear, no-oriented question. Just one line. Have you given up on this project?
Have you given up on this project? It is a brilliantly effective tool.
It really is.
Why do you think that specific phrasing works so universally?
Well, I think because it strikes right at the core of their professional identity. Nobody wants to think of themselves as a quitter or someone who just gives up and walks away unprofessionally.
No one wants that label.
Right. So they see that email and their ego screams, no, I haven't given up. I'm not a flake. I've just been insanely overwhelmed with this other merger. And suddenly they are replying to you, explaining themselves, apologizing, and re-engaging.
You've used the psychological power of the no to bring them sprinting back to the negotiation table.
It's amazing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally redefines what persuasion actually is.
Yes, so.
Well, we've been conditioned to believe that persuasion is about how bright or smooth or forceful you are.
Right.
We think of it as an intellectual bludgeoning, where you beat the other person with logic and brute force data until they finally submit and agree with you.
The smartest guy in the room wins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But true persuasion is not about you shining. It is about the other party convincing themselves that the solution you want is actually their own idea.
Wow. Okay.
You have to negotiate entirely within their world, and you do that by asking them questions that open paths to your goals.
Yeah.
You are the invisible architect of the path, but they have to be the ones actively choosing to walk down it.
That is such a massive paradigm shift. It means letting go of our own ego, letting go of the need to be the smartest person in the room with the sharpest arguments.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now that we have established that forcing a quick yes is actually a neurological trap, and that embracing no is how we create a safe environment,
Right.
how do we actually move from that baseline of safety into genuine, lasting behavioral change? I mean, how do we actually change someone's mind when the stakes are high?
To find out, we have to look at the people who handle the absolute highest stakes imaginable. We're talking about the FBI.
Okay, the big leagues.
Specifically, the FBI's Elite Crisis Negotiation Unit, or the CNU. This unit is attached directly to the hostage rescue team.
Serious business.
Very. They are the National Counterterrorist Response Assets, the absolute best of the best in high-pressure communication. They operate out of the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia.
Famous place.
In law enforcement circles, Quantico is practically a mythical place. It is the absolute center of behavioral knowledge. When a negotiation somewhere in the country, say a bank robbery gone wrong or a barricaded suspect, is going completely off the rails and local negotiators are running out of options and time, they are told to call Quantico to find out what to do next.
And what Quantico has developed over decades of research and life or death application is this fascinating, really rigid framework called the Behavioral Change Stairway model.
Yes, the BCSM.
Right. It's a 5-stage process. You literally start at the bottom step and work your way up. The stages are active listening, empathy, rapport, influence, and finally, behavioral change.
And the golden rule is that you cannot skip a step.
You can't just jump straight to influence without first building rapport.
Exactly. And you can't build rapport without demonstrating empathy.
And empathy requires intense active listening.
What's truly remarkable about this model is that this high-stakes life-or-death framework didn't originate in a tactical combat manual. No, it has its roots in traditional clinical psychology. Specifically, it traces back to the legendary American psychologist Carl Rogers.
Carl Rogers, okay.
Rogers proposed a concept that revolutionized therapy, which he called unconditional positive regard.
Unconditional positive regard.
Right. He believed that real, profound change within a human being can only occur when a therapist, or in our context, a negotiator, accepts the person sitting across from them exactly as they are.
Without judgment.
Exactly. Without any judgment, without any conditions, and without any demand for immediate change.
Wait, hold on. I have to push back on this. Unconditional positive regard for a terrorist who is holding hostages.
I know how it sounds.
Or a bank robber threatening to execute innocent people. How is that not just validating evil? I mean, if I'm an FBI agent, my instinct isn't to accept this guy. It's to assert dominance, secure the perimeter, and let him know he's going to prison.
That's the natural law enforcement instinct.
Right. How do they justify giving a violent criminal unconditional regard without completely losing control of the negotiation? It sounds way too warm and fuzzy for the FBI.
It's a brilliant question. And it's exactly what most hard-nosed law enforcement officers think when they are first exposed to this training. But unconditional positive regard does not mean agreeing with their actions, and it does not mean endorsing their crimes.
Okay. What does it mean then?
It means accepting their psychological reality in that specific moment. To understand why it's so necessary, we have to look at how human beings are socialized from childhood.
Socialized how?
Well, society conditions almost all of us to seek approval by hiding who we really are. When we are kids, the love, praise, and approval we get from our parents and our teachers is usually highly conditional. It depends entirely on us saying and doing the correct things.
Right. Clean your room and I'll be proud of you.
Exactly. Sit still in class and you get a gold star.
So we learn to perform.
Precisely. We are trained from a very early age to constantly calibrate our words to gain the approval of authority figures. We figure out what the person in power wants to hear, and we say it while carefully keeping our actual internal messy reality hidden away.
We just tell them what they want to hear.
Yes.
Yes.
We develop a deeply ingrained habit of offering a fake yes because it is the path of least resistance to social harmony and survival.
Which brings us to one of the most mind-blowing statistics I have ever heard. This completely rewired how I view human behavior.
It's a powerful one.
It's a statistic from the medical field, specifically regarding coronary heart disease patients. These are people who have just gone through severe, traumatic, chest-cracking open heart surgery.
Literally life or death.
Right. They are lying in a hospital bed, recovering from literally having their heart stopped and restarted. And the cardiologist comes into the room and says, look, this surgery was not a magic cure. It was a temporary patch. The only way you are going to truly prolong your life and not end up back on this table in 6 months is if you make massive fundamental lifestyle and behavioral changes. You have to change your diet entirely. You have to start exercising daily. You have to manage your stress.
And what does the patient say?
The patient, who is full of post-operative gratitude and absolute terror of dying, looks at the doctor with tears in their eyes and says, yes, doctor. Of course, this is my second chance at life. I am going to change everything.
It is the ultimate yes. It is emphatic, it is highly emotional, and it feels entirely genuine in that specific moment.
But the clinical studies show that 2 years after that operation, more than 90% of those patients haven't changed their lifestyle at all.
90%?
90%. They are staring death right in the face. They enthusiastically agreed to change everything, and yet nothing happened.
Unbelievable.
When I read that, I immediately thought of our New Year's resolutions, right? We make these grand declarations to ourselves and to our friends. Yes, I will go to the gym 5 days a week, starting January 1st.
And by February?
By February, we're back on the couch. Because that superficial yes is really just the brain's way of surviving an uncomfortable conversation in the present moment. We are essentially taking out a psychological loan, borrowing against a future version of ourselves that we honestly have absolutely no real intention of honoring.
That is a phenomenal way to articulate the mechanism. A superficial yes is a survival mechanism for the present moment. It gets the doctor out of the room. It gets the nagging spouse off your back.
Right.
And this is exactly why Carl Rogers' theory of unconditional positive regard is so vital, and why the FBI relies on it so heavily. If society deeply conditions us to hide our true selves and offer fake compliance to authority figures, whether that's a doctor, a boss, or a heavily armed SWAT team outside a bank, then the only way to bypass that lifelong conditioning is to create an environment where the counterpart feels absolutely zero judgment.
Zero judgment.
They have to feel that your regard for them, your willingness to listen to them, is not conditional on them immediately surrendering or saying the right thing.
Because the moment they feel judged, the walls go back up and you're back to getting the fake yes.
Exactly. And this raises an important question. How does this apply to us? The stakes of an everyday negotiation with your teenager over curfew or with your boss over a promotion are obviously not the same as a hostage negotiation.
Or a literal health crisis.
Right. But the core insight from the FBI is that the psychological environment required for gut-level compliance, real, enduring change, not just temporary obedience, is exactly the same.
It's human nature.
Yes. You have to walk them up that 5-step stairway.
Hmm.
You have to engender enough trust and connection through active listening and empathy that you establish that unconditional positive regard. Only then will you experience a breakthrough moment where you can actually begin exerting true influence.
And here is where it gets incredibly specific. The signal that you have reached that breakthrough moment, the sign that you have actually made it to the top of the stairs and achieved that psychological environment. It isn't the word yes.
No.
The sweetest two words in any negotiation, the ultimate signal of genuine behavioral change, are, that's right.
That's right. You're right. Not yes. But that's right.
Right.
And to fully grasp the immense power of that specific phrase and how expert negotiators practically weaponize it to break impossible deadlocks, we're going to dive into a real-world crucible.
Yes. To see this theoretical 5-step stairway actually put into practice under the most extreme pressure imaginable, we are traveling to a militant encampment deep in the southern Philippines. The year is August 2000.
The context here is incredibly tense. A militant Islamic group known as Abu Sayyaf had just kidnapped a man named Jeffrey Schilling.
Right. Schilling was a 24-year-old American from California who had traveled near their base on Jolo Island. He was a civilian entirely unconnected to any military or government agency.
Just a guy in the wrong place.
Suddenly, he is a hostage, held in a jungle camp, and the rebel group slaps a staggering $10 million price tag on his head.
So Chris, who was a Supervisory Special Agent with the FBI's Crisis Negotiation Unit, flies straight to Manila. He and his partner are tasked with establishing the negotiation strategy for the U.S. government.
Okay.
And they're going up against a truly formidable, almost cinematic adversary, a rebel leader named Abu Sabaya.
Sabaya.
We really have to understand the profile of the counterpart here because it dictates the entire strategy. Sabaya was not just a low-level foot soldier following orders. He was a veteran of the rebel movement with a highly violent past.
He was ruthless.
A terror sociopath who had a documented history of severe atrocities, murder, and torture. But interestingly, alongside that extreme violence, he was also deeply, almost comically obsessed with the media.
Yeah, the guy's vanity was off the charts.
Absolutely.
He loved the spotlight more than anything. He literally had prominent Philippine reporters on his speed dial. They would call him on his satellite phone and ask him questions in his native Tagalog, and he would deliberately answer them in English because he knew that soundbite would get his voice broadcast globally on CNN.
He's playing to the cameras.
He walked around the jungle constantly wearing mirrored sunglasses, a bandana, a tight black t-shirt, and camo pants because he thought it made him look like a dashing action hero. He actually told reporters during interviews, they should make a movie about me.
But behind the theatricality and the sociopathic violence, the FBI negotiators recognized a very distinct psychological profile.
What did they see?
Well, Sabaya had an ego the size of a mountain, but he was also operating like a cold-blooded businessman. He understood that in Jeffrey Schilling, he possessed an item of immense value. He was playing a commodities game on an international scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because you look at that $10 million demand, and your first thought is naturally, this guy is a crazy religious zealot pulling massive numbers out of thin air to sound intimidating.
Right, just throwing out a huge number.
But he wasn't. Sabaya arrived at that specific number through a shockingly cold, rational business calculation based on the geopolitical market at the time. He was looking at two very specific factors.
Let's break those factors down because it shows how methodical he was.
Yeah.
First, Sabaya knew that the United States government was currently offering a $5 million bounty for information leading to the arrest of any remaining fugitives from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
Okay, so there's the $5 million.
Right. Sabaya's logic was entirely straightforward. If the U.S. government is willing to pay $5 million to get their hands on an enemy they hate, surely they will pay at least double that amount to get their hands on one of their own innocent citizens.
Which is a terrifyingly logical comp, right? He's running real estate comparables for a human life. Well, the house down the street sold for 5, so this one is worth 10.
Exactly.
And the second factor he was looking at was even crazier. A rival faction of Abu Sayyaf had just reportedly been paid $20 million for releasing 6 Western European captives. And who paid that massive ransom?
The Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi.
Yes, he paid it under the thinly veiled guise of development aid.
And just to add another layer of absurdity to the international stage, a significant portion of that $20 million was actually paid in counterfeit bills. Gaddafi used the entire situation as a geopolitical stunt to simultaneously embarrass Western governments who couldn't free their own people and to funnel money to militant groups he sympathized with.
So Sabaya looks at the $5 million U.S. bounty. He looks at Gaddafi's $20 million payout to his rivals. He does the math in his head, and he prices his asset at exactly $10 million. He is acting exactly like a commodities broker.
It was pure business to him.
But there was a massive, insurmountable problem with his calculation. Jeffrey Schilling wasn't a billionaire. He didn't come from generational wealth. He came from a working-class family in California. His mother might have been able to scrape together $10,000 by borrowing from everyone she knew, but $10 million was a total fantasy.
Not going to happen.
And the U.S. government policy is incredibly strict and well-known. They do not pay ransoms, period. They would only ever allow a payment to be made if it was part of a tightly controlled sting operation designed to catch the kidnappers in the act of retrieving the money.
And this is where the standard FBI negotiation playbook usually comes in.
Right.
Their initial goal in these situations is always to draw the kidnapper into a traditional offer-counter-offer bargaining system. If they could just get Sabaya haggling over the price, offering less, Sabaya asking for more, going back and forth, they knew they had a system that worked almost every time.
Because haggling buys time.
Exactly. They could slowly beat the price down over weeks or months, drag the process out to ensure the hostage stays alive, negotiate the eventual release, and simultaneously use all that time to set up a tactical sting operation.
But Sabaya is too smart for that.
He completely stalls them. He refuses to budge off the $10 million.
And he does it with a brilliant, maddening rhetorical pivot. He realizes that a straight transactional ransom is hitting a wall, so he changes the framing of the demand entirely.
What does he do?
He tells the negotiators, this $10 million is not a ransom for Jeffrey Schilling, it is war damages.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a masterful and highly dangerous negotiation tactic by Sabaya. By shifting the demand from a transactional ransom to a historical grievance, he makes the problem seemingly unsolvable by standard logic.
Because it's not about money anymore.
Right. He started arguing on the phone that Muslims in the Philippines had suffered 500 years of oppression, dating all the way back to when Spanish missionaries brought Catholicism to the islands in the 16th century.
500 years.
He cited violated fishing rights in the local waters, historical atrocities committed by various regimes, the absolute need for an independent Islamic state. He took every historical grievance he could possibly think of and threw it into the pot to justify the $10 million.
It's a brilliant trap. Because how do you logically argue against 500 years of complex history when you're just trying to get a 24-year-old kid from California back home?
You can't.
The negotiators would try to use logic. They would say, Sabaya, what does Jeff Schilling have to do with Spanish missionaries in the 1500s? He wasn't even born, and Sabaya just wouldn't care. The logic fell on completely deaf ears.
He just ignored it.
He held incredibly firm to his war damages demand, completely locking the FBI out of the counter-offer system they so desperately needed to use. And occasionally, just to keep the pressure agonizingly high on the negotiators, he would drop in casual threats that he was currently torturing Schilling.
So the FBI is completely stuck. They are facing an impenetrable wall of historical rhetoric and a counterpart who utterly refuses to play their bargaining game. But what's fascinating is that before they could effectively deploy their behavioral change Stairway model on Sabaya to break this deadlock, they first had to deploy it on their own team.
Yes. This is a realization that I think every professional who works in any kind of team environment can relate to. The FBI couldn't just pick up the phone and talk to Sabaya directly. It doesn't work that way internationally.
He needed a go-between.
Right. They had to work through a proxy, a local Filipino military officer named Benji, who was the official voice on the phone. And Benji had absolutely zero interest in making friends with a terrorist.
Benji's background is crucial to understand the internal conflict here. He wasn't a diplomat, he wasn't a psychologist, he was a hardened warrior.
A tough guy.
He was a genuine Filipino patriot and a highly decorated hero, the leader of the Philippine National Police's Special Action Force. He had been in countless brutal firefights in the jungle. He and his men were the ones sent on tactical rescue missions to save hostages by force, and they had a sterling, fearsome record. It specifically noted that Benji's men rarely took handcuffs. They were a lethal force unit.
So picture this dynamic. You have Benji, this hardened military commander who solves problems with bullets, and you have the FBI negotiator sitting next to him telling him, okay, Benji, when Sabaya calls today, we want you to use active listening.
Oh, man.
We want you to establish a rapport with him. We want you to empathize with his worldview. And Benji is visibly disgusted by this. He hates Sabaya with every fiber of his being. He wants to take a hard line, to speak in direct, aggressive, no-nonsense military terms. He views the FBI's psychological approach as weak, distasteful, and almost cowardly.
This creates a severe internal crisis for the negotiation team. You have two allies, the FBI experts and the local military proxy, with fundamentally misaligned approaches. The FBI realizes they are pushing Benji too hard.
He's burning out.
Yeah, they've been working him nearly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for weeks on end. Benji finally asks for a break to go see his family in the mountains.
And what does the FBI say?
The FBI agrees, but on the strict condition that they can accompany him and spend the weekend working on the negotiation strategy at the American ambassador's summer residence.
Okay, picture this scene because it's so cinematic. It's a Saturday night. They are sitting in the wood-paneled library of the ambassador's summer residence. The FBI agent is explaining to Benji, yet again, the absolute necessity of establishing a rapport-based working relationship, even with an adversary as dangerous and evil as Sabaya.
And how is Benji reacting?
The FBI agent looks over at Benji, and Benji is visibly snarling. His face is contorted in a literal, physical snarl. He is rejecting the strategy with his entire body.
It is at this exact moment that the FBI agent realizes a profound truth about negotiation. Before you can convince someone to see what you are trying to accomplish, you have to say the things to them that will get them to say, "That's right."
Ah, there it is.
The agent realizes he has to negotiate with Benji before they can ever hope to negotiate with Sabaya. He needs to use his high-stakes crisis tactics on his own coworker.
I was so struck by this. Think about how often this happens in a corporate setting. You're trying to roll out a new software system across the company, and the head IT guy is so frustrated with the legacy system and the budget cuts that he's actively blocking your progress.
You can't just fight him.
Right. You can't just mandate the new software and argue with him. You have to de-escalate your own IT guy first.
Let's
So it's
try.
like trying to put out a house fire. But first, you have to talk down the firefighter who is so angry at the fire that he's refusing to turn on the hose. So what does the FBI agent do?
He uses a specific tactic from the Stairway model.
Mm.
He uses the label.
Yes.
He looks at Benji and says, "You hate Sabaya, don't you?"
Just calls it right out.
You hate Sabaya, don't you? It's a direct, unflinching acknowledgement of the underlying emotional reality that is blocking all of their progress. And the result is immediate and explosive.
What happens?
Benji completely unloads. He shouts, "I tell you I do," and then he pours out all the reasons why. He recounts Sabaya's horrific atrocities in vivid detail. He talks about the rapes, the murders of innocent civilians.
He just lets it all out.
He tells a specific haunting story about how Sabaya came on the military radio frequency while Benji's men were lobbing heavy mortars at his jungle position, and Sabaya laughed through the static and said, "These mortars are music to my ears."
That is chilling.
Benji talks about hearing Sabaya's voice on the radio celebrating while literally standing over the dead, mutilated body of one of Benji's own officers.
He just vents all of this profound, completely justified trauma and rage. It all comes spilling out. And then the most amazing thing happens.
What's that?
Once he gets it all out, once he fully unloads that emotion because the FBI agent simply acknowledged it without judging it or telling him to calm down, Benji instantly calms down.
It's like a pressure valve releasing.
Exactly. He gains total control of his anger. And from that moment forward, he fully embraces the FBI's strategy and becomes a superstar negotiator.
Let's look closely at the neurology of that breakthrough, because this is the emotional equivalent of saying that's right.
Okay, let's look at the brain.
When you experience intense negative emotions, like rage or fear, your amygdala, the threat detection center of the brain, is highly active. It literally draws cognitive resources away from your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational, logical thought.
So you literally can't think straight.
Right, this is what we call an emotional swamp. By labeling the emotion you hate, Sabaya, the FBI agent didn't try to argue Benji out of his feelings. He didn't say, "Benji, you need to put your personal feelings aside for the mission."
Because that would have been a threat.
Exactly. That would have been perceived as a threat and would have heightened the amygdala response. Instead, he validated the reality of Benji's anger. Neurologically, labeling a negative emotion decreases activity in the amygdala. By bringing the emotion into the light, the agent allowed Benji's brain to cool down, clear the emotional swamp, and return blood flow to his prefrontal cortex so he could regain logical control.
And what's so powerful is that this breakthrough is completely invisible to the counterpart. To Benji, it didn't feel like a psychological manipulation or a negotiation tactic was being used on him. It just felt like a subtle, highly personal epiphany.
He felt seen.
He felt heard, he felt deeply understood by his American partner, and once his emotional reality was validated, he no longer needed to aggressively defend it. He could move on to the task at hand.
Exactly. And now, with Benji fully on board, possessing a newfound emotional control and a mastery of the strategy, the team was finally ready to hit the reset switch on Sabaya.
It's game time.
They'd endured 4 agonizing months of negotiations, 4 months of Sabaya's impenetrable war damages loop, pacing back and forth on the phone, aggressively demanding, "Tell me yes or no." It was time to break the deadlock.
So we arrive at the execution phase. The FBI drafts a 2-page document for Benji. It is a highly choreographed script utilizing their entire active listening arsenal, designed with one single laser-focused purpose: to trigger the ultimate realization point in Abu Sabaya. Let's walk through the 6 steps of this masterclass because this is the exact playbook listeners can use in their own lives.
The first step in the script is the use of effective pauses.
Pauses. Silence.
Right. Silence is incredibly powerful in a negotiation. Most of us are terrified of awkward silence. Evolutionarily, silence in a social setting implies a break in the social cohesion, which feels dangerous.
We want to fill the gap.
Exactly. So we rush to fill it with nervous chatter or rational arguments or premature concessions. But the FBI instructed Benji to use silence intentionally for emphasis.
How so?
When Sabaya made a crazy demand, Benji was told to just go silent. It encourages the counterpart to keep talking, to keep pouring out their thoughts, to fill the void, until, just like with Benji's own emotional swamp, the raw emotion is entirely drained from the dialogue.
Right. Let them talk themselves out until they hit the bottom of the barrel. The second step is minimal encouragers. While they are talking to fill that silence, you don't want to stay totally mute because that can eventually feel hostile or disconnected. You use simple, neutral phrases when you say it.
Yes? Okay. I see. You aren't agreeing with their demands. You are just effectively conveying that you are paying full attention to what they are saying. You are keeping them on the hook.
Step 3 is mirroring. And we need to clarify what the FBI means by this because it's not about physically copying someone's body language.
Like crossing your arms when they do.
Right. It's not that. In crisis negotiation, mirroring is simply repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what the counterpart just said. Rather than arguing with Sabaya and trying to inject logic, like saying Jeff Schilling wasn't alive 500 years ago, Benji was instructed to simply listen and mirror.
So if Sabaya says, "We have been oppressed for 500 years," Benji just says, 500 years. Mirroring bypasses the brain's threat detection center entirely and triggers a subconscious bonding response. It naturally encourages the person to elaborate further on their thought process without feeling interrogated.
Okay, let's unpack step 4, because this is where we start getting deep into the psychological well, maybe not manipulation, but influence. Step 4 is labeling. We saw this with Benji earlier when the agent said, "You hate Sabaya."
Right, giving feelings a name.
This is giving the counterpart's feelings a name, identifying with how they feel without necessarily agreeing with the facts of the situation. So Benji might say to Sabaya, "It seems like you feel this history is tragically unfair," or "It sounds like you were incredibly angry about the fishing rights."
Using neutral phrases.
Yeah, you use neutral phrases like "it seems like" or "it sounds like." You are naming the emotion, anger, unfairness, and bringing it into the light to cool that amygdala down.
Then we move to step 5, paraphrasing. This is distinctly different from mirroring. Mirroring is repeating their exact words. Paraphrasing is repeating the counterpart's meaning back to them, but using your own words.
Ah, okay.
This is incredibly powerful because it proves to the counterpart that you are not just parroting them like a tape recorder. You have actually exerted the cognitive effort to internalize and understand the core of their argument.
And then finally, step 6, the ultimate weapon in the FBI arsenal, the summary.
This is the big one.
The formula for this is very specific. Paraphrasing plus labeling equals a summary. It is the combination of re-articulating the meaning of what is said and acknowledging the deep emotions underlying that meaning. The FBI told Benji, "You need to listen, and then you need to completely, perfectly repeat the world according to Abu Sabaya."
This is the crux of the entire strategy. Benji had to fully and completely summarize All of the historical nonsense, the 500 years of oppression, the fishing rights, the Spanish missionaries, he had to lay it all out, validating Sabaya's worldview and the intense, violent emotions attached to it.
Without agreeing to the ransom.
Exactly. The psychological hypothesis was that once Benji did that flawlessly, the only possible response for Sabaya or anyone faced with a truly accurate, non-judgmental summary of their own deeply held beliefs would be to say, that's right.
So the stage is set. 2 days later, the satellite phone rings. It's Sabaya, and the masterclass begins.
Benji goes to work.
Sabaya speaks, and Benji just executes the script with military precision. Sabaya rants about the Spanish, and Benji pauses. He uses minimal encouragers. He mirrors the ridiculous claims. He labels the emotions, commiserating with the rebel group's predicament. All of these tactics work cumulatively over the course of the call to soften Sabaya up.
And then comes the climax.
Benji delivers the ultimate summary. He repeats, in his own words, Sabaya's entire version of history and all the anger and resentment that came with it. He paints the picture perfectly.
And then, silence.
Nothing.
The transcript of the call notes that Sabaya went completely silent on the line for nearly a full minute. A minute of dead silence on a hostage negotiation call is an eternity. It feels like hours.
I would be sweating.
But Benji held his nerve. He held the silence. He didn't fill it with a question. He let Sabaya process the profound experience of being completely understood. And finally, after that long minute, Sabaya spoke just 2 words.
That's right.
Goosebumps. Sabaya literally yelled, "Tell me yes or no," for months. But the negotiators absolutely refused to give him either, and when they finally gave him a perfect summary of his own mind, it broke the spell.
It's incredible.
What I love about the summary tactic is thinking of it like a perfect mirror. It's not just reflecting the physical image, which is the paraphrase, the raw facts of what they said. It is reflecting the psychological temperature, the label, the emotion. When someone looks into a mirror and sees their exact internal state reflected back at them with total clarity and zero judgment, their defense mechanisms just evaporate. They don't need them anymore.
And the practical results of that single moment were absolutely staggering. The $10 million war damages demand vanished. From that point forward, Sabaya never mentioned money again.
Never brought it up. He never asked for another dime for the release of Jeffrey Schilling. The deadlock was permanently broken. In fact, Sabaya became so weary of the case and so deflated of his righteous anger now that he'd been validated that he eventually let his guard down. Schilling was able to escape from the jungle camp. Philippine commandos swooped in, and he was rescued and returned safely to his family in California.
And the epilogue to that story is wild. 2 weeks after Schilling escapes, Sabaya actually calls Benji on the phone.
He called him.
Yes, not to threaten him, not to curse him out, but to ask, have you been promoted yet? Because if not, you should have been.
Wow.
Sabaya literally confessed to his military adversary, I was going to hurt Jeffrey. I don't know what you did to keep me from doing that, but whatever it was, it worked. Just as a historical footnote, Sabaya was killed in a shootout with military units in 2002. But what an incredible testament to the power of that interaction.
This raises an important question. What does "that's right" actually achieve on a psychological level? Why did it disarm a violent terrorist so completely?
Yeah, why?
In negotiation theory, this is described as a stealth victory. When your adversary says, "that's right," they feel that they have assessed your statement, judged it against their own internal reality, and pronounced it correct of their own free will.
So they aren't giving up.
Exactly. They embrace the conclusion because they feel they own it. It signals that negotiations can proceed from a deadlock because it breaks down a barrier without anyone feeling like they gave in, surrendered, or lost face.
Right. Sabaya didn't feel like he surrendered his argument. He felt like he had finally, miraculously, been perfectly understood by his enemy. So if that's right is the holy grail of negotiation, the absolute peak of the behavioral change stairway, we now need to look at a catastrophic trap.
Yes, the counterfeit phrase.
Because there is a counterfeit phrase, a phrase that sounds almost identical to "that's right," but is actually a signal of total failure. And that phrase is, "you're right."
Driving toward "that's right" is a winning strategy. Hearing "you're right" is a disaster. It is a polite, invisible dismissal.
Okay, let's explore this.
To illustrate this ego mechanic, consider the story of Brandon. Brandy was a big kid, 6'2", 250 pounds, and he played high school football. For most of his career, he played on the defensive line. And the psychology of a defensive lineman is fairly simple. You put your head down, you explode off the line of scrimmage, and you hit the person in front of you as hard as you can.
Right. You are essentially a human battering ram. It's a very straightforward blue-collar job on the field. You hit things, and it makes you happy.
But then, Brandon transfers to a prep school, and his new coach moves him to linebacker. The role of a linebacker is fundamentally different. Your job is not to hit the blocker in front of you. Your job is to avoid the blocker, dodge them, slip past them, and get to the ball carrier to make the tackle.
It's about agility.
But Brandon, despite the new position, kept playing like a defensive lineman. He kept confronting the opposing blockers head-on, smashing into them, locking up, and completely taking himself out of the play.
And you can imagine the coach's frustration.
Absolutely. The coach is pleading with him. His dad, who happens to be an FBI negotiator, is trying to explain it to him. They pull him aside during practice, they show him the whiteboard plays, they explain the physics and the logic. Brandon, you have to dodge the block to get to the ball. And every single time they explained it, Brandon would give them the absolute worst possible answer. He would nod, look them in the eye, and say, "You're right."
You're right. He agreed with them in theory. The logic was completely sound to him, but he wasn't owning the conclusion. So he would go right back out on the field, the whistle would blow, and on the very next play, he would go right back to the exact behavior they were trying to stop. He would smash the blocker. Nothing changed.
You know what "you're right" really is?
What?
It is the conversational equivalent of hitting the snooze button on your alarm clock.
Oh, that's so good.
Think about whenever someone is bothering you. Maybe it's a micromanaging boss or a partner nagging you about a chore you forgot to do, or someone who just won't let up and won't listen to your side of the story. What is the fastest, easiest thing you can say to get them to shut up, smile, and go away for at least 24 hours?
You look at them and say, you know what? You're right.
Exactly. And when you hit that verbal snooze button, you aren't agreeing to wake up and change your behavior. You are just temporarily silencing the annoying noise so you can go back to doing exactly what you were already doing, sleeping.
It works perfectly every time. Tell people you're right, and they get a happy little smile of self-satisfaction on their face. They feel validated in their own intelligence, and they leave you alone. But you haven't actually agreed to their position. You haven't internalized their viewpoint. You have simply paid a small verbal fee to buy yourself temporary peace.
Let's dig into the ego mechanics here because it's crucial for understanding the difference. When you say "you're right," the focus of the phrase is entirely on the speaker's brilliance.
Right. You are right.
You, the person talking to me, are right. You are smart. Your logic is good. I am conceding that point to you. But it doesn't implicate me or my reality.
Right.
However, when you say "that's right," the focus shifts entirely to the subject matter, to the counterpart's reality, the thing we are discussing. My worldview, my situation is right. It makes the realization the property of the person saying it.
So how did the father fix the situation with Brandon? He realized that treating his son like an intellectual problem to be solved with whiteboard logic wasn't working. He was getting the snooze button over and over. He needed a "that's right" breakthrough. So, before a crucial game, he pulled Brandon aside. And instead of explaining the physical mechanics of playing linebacker again, he labeled Brandon's internal emotional state.
What did he say?
He looked at his massive teenage son and said, "You seem to think it's unmanly to dodge a block. You think it's cowardly to get out of someone's way when they're trying to hit you."
And that was the key. He completely bypassed the logic of the playbook and went straight for the ego and the emotional barrier.
Brandon stared at him, paused, processing the fact that his deepest insecurity had just been named without judgment, and finally said, "That's right."
Boom. Breakthrough.
With those two words, Brandon finally embraced the reality of what was actually holding him back. It wasn't a lack of understanding the playbook, it was his own pride and his deeply held definition of masculinity on the football field. Once he owned that conclusion, the behavior changed instantly. He started avoiding the blocks, he became a star linebacker, and his prep school team went undefeated.
That's incredible.
So we've seen this work in the sweltering jungles of the Froutines with a terrorist and on a high school football field in Connecticut. But I know what you, the listener, might be thinking right now. This is all incredibly fascinating. It makes for great stories at a dinner party. But I am not an FBI agent negotiating for hostages, and I am not a football coach. How does this help me on a Tuesday afternoon when I'm just trying to get my job done?
Right, let's bring it all home. We are moving from the jungle to the boardroom.
Let's look at how applying these exact same tactics leads to massive, everyday career success.
Let's start with the classic high-pressure sales scenario.
Yeah.
We have a sales representative for a large pharmaceutical company. Her job was to sell a new medical product to doctors. She had a specific doctor in her territory who was a crucial target. He was the largest prescriber of similar medications in the area. Landing this single account was critical for her quarterly success.
But the doctor wasn't playing ball.
No, he was completely cold. He was skeptical, unfriendly, and highly dismissive. He didn't even want to hear her viewpoint. Every time she tried to pitch the positive attributes of her product, he would interrupt her, throw up a wall of no, and knock her arguments down.
It's a classic adversarial negotiation. She's pushing features and benefits, and he's pushing back.
So she decides to change tactics entirely. She stops pitching, and she starts actively listening. She realizes through careful observation that this doctor is deeply, incredibly passionate about his patients. He views each patient as special, and his biggest professional priority is tailoring specific treatments to improve their sense of calm and peace, especially for the most difficult, chronic cases.
So at her next appointment, she walks into his office. And instead of opening her glossy brochure and touting her product's efficacy rates, she uses a summary. She looks at him and says, "Doctor, the last time I was in, we spoke extensively about your patients. I remember thinking that you seemed very passionate about treating them and how you work incredibly hard to tailor the specific treatment to each and every patient to ensure they get exactly what they need."
She perfectly labeled his internal drive and paraphrased his entire approach to medicine. And what does he do? He stops. He looks at her as if he's really seeing her for the first time, not as a salesperson, but as a peer. And he says, "That's right. I really feel like I'm treating an epidemic that other doctors aren't picking up on."
The defensive walls instantly come down. By validating his passion, by establishing that unconditional positive regard for his medical philosophy, he drops his guard completely.
He starts trusting her.
He sits down and begins giving her specific, detailed examples of the intricacies and problems he faces with his most difficult patients. She doesn't interrupt. She continues to listen, paraphrase, and reflect his challenges back to him using minimal encouragers.
And because she became an investigator of his world, rather than a pusher of her own product, she learned exactly where her medication fit into his practice. Once the rapport was solidly built, she could finally explain how her product could specifically help those exact difficult patients he just told her about.
And his response went from cold dismissal to, "Let me give yours a try." She made the biggest sale of her quarter not by arguing logic, but by demonstrating profound understanding.
Now, let's look at a corporate negotiation, which often involves navigating complex, unwritten internal politics. This involves a Korean MBA graduate who worked in human resources for a massive global electronics company. He'd been stationed in the semiconductor division, but he desperately wanted to switch to the consumer electronics division at headquarters.
Okay.
He had interviewed and actually secured 2 separate job offers from the consumer side, but corporate culture and a strict sense of unwritten hierarchical rules dictated that he needed his ex-boss's blessing to make the move.
So he calls his ex-boss, who's currently traveling in the U.S., and the ex-boss immediately shoots him down. "You should reject those offers and find your spot here with the semiconductor division." Boom. The door is slammed. The student is depressed, ready to give up his dream job just to obey his superior and maintain harmony.
But he checks with a friend in HR and confirms a crucial detail. There is no official HR rule blocking him. It's purely a matter of the boss's ego and approval. So he calls the ex-boss back, but this time he completely shifts his approach.
He stops fighting.
He stops arguing for his own desire to move and starts asking paths-opening questions to map the ex-boss's internal world. He asks, "Is there any specific reason you want me to go to semiconductor headquarters?" The boss deflects, giving vague corporate answers about it being the best position for his career track.
So what does this all mean? The student realizes the boss is hiding his true motivation. He keeps probing gently, using mirroring and effective pauses. "Will you please tell me what made you decide I should remain in semiconductors?" And finally, after feeling heard and not attacked, the boss cracks and reveals his real need. He needs someone to help him network at headquarters between the semiconductor and consumer products divisions.
And here's where the student deploys the absolute masterstroke. He uses a summary to reflect this new reality. He says, "So it sounds like you could approve my new position no matter which division I'm in, as long as I was in headquarters and could help you communicate better with the top managers."
And the ex-boss, hearing his secret need validated, replies, "That's right. I must admit I need your help in headquarters."
By getting to, that's right, the student unlocked what expert negotiators call black swans.
Black swans.
These are the hidden, unspoken, deeply personal underlying dynamics of a negotiation that completely change the game once they are uncovered. Once the boss felt understood, he revealed his ultimate secret. He was up for a massive promotion to vice president in 2 years, and he desperately needed an ally at headquarters to lobby the CEO on his behalf.
This is a profound shift in perspective. The negotiation wasn't actually about the semiconductor division versus the consumer electronics division at all. It was a zero-sum game only in the student's mind. In reality, it was about the boss's personal ambition and deep anxiety about his upcoming promotion. Once the student understood that underlying emotional reality, the solution was incredibly easy. He told his boss, I can help you network and talk you up to the CEO even if I'm working in the consumer products division, right? And the boss says, that's right. If you get an offer there, I will approve it immediately.
The student got exactly what he wanted by figuring out exactly what his counterpart secretly needed. He stopped treating the conversation as a battle over corporate rules and became an investigator of his boss's underlying fears and desires.
And just to show how universal this is, think about Emily from LA, a listener who used these exact same active listening and summarizing techniques in a simple price negotiation for a freelance contract. Instead of doing what we all normally do, which is haggling back and forth and eventually just splitting the difference and settling for a mediocre compromise in the middle, she relentlessly mapped her client's fears about the project timeline, summarized them perfectly, got her client to say that's right, and walked away with exactly the premium price she initially asked for.
What all of these business examples demonstrate so clearly is that whether you are talking to a militant rebel in a jungle, a stubborn teenager on a football field, a dismissive doctor in a clinic, or a corporate boss in a high-rise, human beings are fundamentally driven by the exact same need.
The need to be heard.
The need to feel heard, deeply understood, and validated in their emotional reality. When you provide that validation, you completely disarm their neurological defenses and open the door to true, collaborative cooperation.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've journeyed through the hidden, counterintuitive psychology of human communication, and it's time to synthesize what we've learned so you can take it out into the real world. If you take nothing else away from this deep dive, remember the hierarchy of agreement. Remember that pushing for a quick, superficial yes is often a trap that breeds resentment, spikes the amygdala, and results in fake compliance.
Remember that inviting a no is actually the start of psychological safety and autonomy for your counterpart.
Be incredibly wary of the phrase, you're right. It is a polite dismissal, the conversational snooze button that means nothing has changed. But when you can perfectly summarize someone else's worldview, including their underlying messy emotions, and they look at you and say, that's right, you have just unlocked the gateway to genuine, lasting behavioral change.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over. We've seen today that the ultimate weapon in high-stakes negotiation requires you to perfectly summarize and validate your opponent's emotional worldview, even if that opponent is a dangerous extremist or a frustrating boss or an angry teenager.
Right.
You have to reflect their reality back to them with zero judgment. Does that mean, then, that the most powerful tool of influence we possess as humans is actually profound involuntary empathy? We often think of negotiation as a form of tactical manipulation. But this entire methodology suggests a fascinating paradox. Can you truly manipulate someone to get what you want, or do you first have to deeply, genuinely understand them?
Wow. Empathy is the ultimate tactical advantage. That is a completely different way to look at human interaction. Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you find yourself in a difficult conversation or facing a frustrating deadlock where nothing seems to be working, try putting the sledgehammer of logic away. Build the stairway, become a perfect mirror, clear their emotional swamp, and see if you can trigger those two magical words. That's right. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.